You're listening to old Western stories, where dust settles slow, guns speak loud, and every tale rides straight into your imagination. Hit that subscribe and saddle up, the ride's just startin'. Alton Place ran higher than usual, fed by last night's storm. Every board of the house groaned like it remembered better years, and the woman inside moved slow, like she wasn't in a rush to meet the day. Folks called her Ada Dalton, and if there was softness in her once, it had been folded up and stored with her mother's linens long ago. She stepped off the porch with a shotgun tucked under one arm and a pail in her hand. Chickens scattered underfoot, dust rising in lazy spirals. Then she saw the tracks, hoofprints deep and staggered, cutting clean across the edge of her turnip rows. Not fresh, but not more than a few hours old neither. Horsed been hurt, limping east. Rider maybe worse. Ada narrowed her eyes toward the tree line where cottonwoods lined the bend like sentinels. She didn't spook easy, but something tugged at her belly, cold and tight. She slung the pail and swapped it for both hands on the shotgun. Wasn't 10 minutes later she found him, curled like a broken question mark beneath a juniper bush, half covered in pine needles, and a layer of blood gone brown at the edges. His hat lay beside him, crown caved in, and has been torn open where a bullet had chewed through the side of his gut. Looked like he tried to bind it with a piece of saddlebag canvas, now soaked near black. He didn't move when she stepped closer, didn't flinch when the barrel of her gun pressed against his temple. "You breathin'?" she asked, low and hard. The man blinked, barely, one eye swollen, the other sharp as a nail. "Don't look like I'm talking, do I?" he rasped. Ada studied him a moment longer. Hair matted with sweat and dirt, jaw lined with 3 days of bad luck and stubborn. He looked familiar maybe, but only in that way all busted men do, like life had a mean hand and he'd shook it more than once. "You got a name," he coughed, which brought a grunt and fresh red blooming across his side. "Used to. Don't much matter now." She could have left him, ought to have, but something in his voice wasn't pleading, wasn't proud neither, just resigned. An hour later he was laid up in her father's old room, the one that still smelled faintly of pipe smoke and wood oil, where the window stuck on humid days and the floorboard near the washstand creaked like it had a secret. She cleaned the wound with boiled whiskey and grit teeth, stitched it with thread meant for mending trousers, and kept the shotgun by the door just the same. He said little, slept mostly. Fever chased him some nights. Other times he'd mutter names she didn't recognize, places that didn't exist on any map worth reading. On the 3rd day he asked for water and she obliged. On the 4th he asked for her name. "Ada," she said, not bothering to ask his again. "Hell of a name," he murmured. "Fits." By the 6th day he could sit up against the headboard, pale as a ghost but clear-eyed. That's when the riders came, 4 of 'em. Dusty coats, hands resting casual on holstered irons. The one in front wore a badge, tin dulled from time but still catching enough sun to matter. "Marshal Bearden," he said, tipping his hat. "We're trackin' a man been runnin' near a week now. Robbery down in Juniper Pass. 2 dead. Same fella shot a rancher out near Dry River some years back. Heard tell he come limpin' through here." Ada stood straight in the doorway, her dress smeared with flour and sweat. The marshal's eyes slid past her toward the open window upstairs, where a curtain fluttered like nervous fingers. "Can't say I seen him," she said. The marshal studied her a moment longer, then nodded slow. "Mind if we water our horses?" "Creek's just down the bend," she replied. They rode off without further word, but not far. She watched their silhouettes settle on the ridge, waiting like wolves when the sky starts to bruise. Back inside, the man she'd been nursing stood by the washstand, clutching the edge like it might give him answers. "They ain't gone," she said. "Nope." She stared at him hard. "That marshal said you killed a rancher, Dry River, 4 or 5 years ago." He didn't answer, Just looked down at the cracked porcelain basin where water beaded like sweat. Name of the man was Judson Dalton. His eyes lifted then. Slow, careful. Like every movement might shatter what little breath held the room together. Judson was my father. The silence that followed wasn't the loud kind. It was the quiet that rattles deep, that digs into bones. Finally he said, "I didn't know he had a daughter. Didn't matter to the bullet, did it?" "No, ma'am, I reckon it didn't. She should have shot him, right then, right there." Her hand twitched near the shotgun leaning against the bedpost. But she didn't, because now that she was looking close, pieces didn't add up. The wound in her father's chest had been high, angled down, like from horseback. The neighbors said he'd been run down outside the barn. But the bullet had come from close range. Lower, she swallowed. "You didn't rob my father," she said. He shook his head. "Didn't even draw first, just meant to scare him off. He went for his rifle. I was faster. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect a thing. Only thing I got left is truth." By nightfall, the riders were still waiting. He couldn't ride yet, barely walked, and they both knew dawn would bring a reckoning. Ada sat on the porch long after the sky turned coal-black and the moon cut a thin scar across the clouds. Inside, he was packing what little he had: a revolver with one round, a torn photograph of a younger man and a woman with soft eyes, and a note she didn't read. Just before midnight he stepped outside. "You could turn me in," he said. "Be easier." She stared into the dark, toward the ridge where orange embers from their campfire blinked like eyes. "Maybe," she said. He nodded once as if that settled it. Then she handed him her father's old Colt. "5 rounds in it," she said. 6 if you count yourself." He took it without a word, and the night held its breath. Come morning, the changed. Rolled down off the high pass with a rasp in its throat, like it had clawed its way through scrub and frost to find him. It rattled the eaves and sent the porch boards creaking low, and Ada knew it wouldn't be long now. The riders hadn't moved from the ridge. Still 4 of them, fires cold now but their horses restless, the way beasts get when men tighten reins without speaking. She hadn't slept. Neither had the man. He'd sat by the cold stove with the Colt laid across his lap, legs stretched out stiff and boots still muddy. There was something final in the way he held himself, like a tree not yet fallen but already hollow. Ada poured the last of the coffee into a tin mug, hands steady though the smell of burned chicory curled her stomach. She set it in front of him and leaned against the doorframe, her father's old coat wrapped tight round her. "You gonna ride out?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Don't reckon I'd get far. You'd die running." "Likely." She waited. Wind tugged the corner of the barn roof. A loose hinge on the smokehouse door clattered like teeth. "Why'd you stop here?" she asked finally. "Could have kept going." He took a sip, winced. "Didn't have it in me. Saw the trees, the creek. Figured I'd die better with dirt under me than dust." "You still aim to die?" He turned his eyes on her then. "Not defiant, just tired. Don't reckon it matters what I aim." She let that settle, then pushed off the frame and stepped inside. From the shelf above the hearth she pulled down a leather pouch and set it on the table between them. Coins inside. A few old notes, not much. "What's this?" he asked. "That marshal's gonna offer you a trade. Surrender, trial, maybe the gallows, maybe not. But I know the look of a man fixin' to shoot before he speaks. That badge ain't gonna make it past noon. And this buys me what? A horse and an hour's lead. Buys you a choice." He stared at the pouch, then at her. "You sure?" "Ain't nothing sure. Not since the day they put my father in the ground and told me it was God's will." A silence stretched, broken only by the distant snort of a horse. He stood, slow, walked to the window. The curtain whispered against the frame as he cracked it an inch. "They're splittin' up," he muttered. "2 ridden round the east, 2 settin' up at the trail fork. Tighter net. Means they ain't plannin' to wait forever." "No, they ain't." He turned back toward her, voice low. "They're another way off this land. Old sheep trail behind the root cellar, cuts through the gulch past Widow Mackey's old fence line." He nodded. "Too narrow for a posse to ride hard. But steep. You'll make it if you don't fall. And if I do, then God'll have his say." He looked at her like he wanted to say something else. Didn't. Just picked up the pouch, stuffed it into his coat, and walked toward the back door. Before he stepped out, Ada said, "When you shot my father, was he beggin'?" The man turned. Something flinched across his face like a horse under a whip. "No, he wasn't that kind." Then he was gone. The back door clicked shut behind him, and the wind filled the space he left with a low moan that sounded too much like grief. She didn't watch him go. Just fetched her rifle from the corner, loaded it slow, and stepped out onto the porch. The sun had clawed its way above the rim of the hills now, painting the ridge in pale gold. The marshals didn't wait long. Within the hour, hoofbeats cracked across the dry brush like bones snapping. She watched 'em come. A pair from the east, ridden hard, another circling from the creek. The fourth, Marshal Bearden, came straight down the main trail, slow and upright, like he already owned what he'd come to take. He stopped 10 paces from her porch, dust thick on his boots. "Mornin', Miss Dalton," he called. "Mornin'," she answered. "We're collectin' a man. Ain't here. I'd like to check that myself." "Ain't no law says you can without my say." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "There's law and there's justice. I serve both." "You serve whatever gives you reason to pull that pistol on your hip." Bearden's jaw tightened. "You protectin' a killer. I'm protectin' my land. Then you best move or you'll lose both." She didn't move. The wind caught the edge of her coat, and the scent of pine and horses drifted between 'em. Behind the marshal, the other 3 fanned out slow, like shadows slippin' between the trees. Bearden nodded once. "Search the place." One of his men dismounted, walked up the steps. Ada's finger stayed near the trigger, but she didn't raise the rifle. "You do this," she said to Bearden, "and whatever you think is justice dies here too." The marshal just stared. The boots of the deputy echoed on the porch behind her. Inside, furniture scraped, a door creaked, the back door slammed. Moments passed. Then the deputy stepped out again, shook his head. "He ain't here." Bearden's lips pressed thin. "You sure? Nothing but a cooling bed and a cold stove." Bearden looked past her, eyes narrowed toward the hills. "Trail's gone cold," he muttered, "or too hot to touch." He turned his eyes back to Ada. "If he's gone, you helped. And I ain't done. Didn't say you were. You see him again, tell him hell's common. I just ain't decided who's bringin' it yet." She didn't answer. Just watched as he turned his horse and rode back the way he came, the others falling in like hounds called off a scent. Dusk curled behind them, and the wind whispered through the trees again, softer now. Inside, she sat at the table where the pouch had been, picked up the empty coffee tin and stared into it like it might tell her where the line was, between right and wrong, past and present. By dusk she was patching the torn screen on the back door when a sound came drifting up from the gulch below. Hooves. Not fast, not many, but not gone either. She stepped off the porch, heart thudding against her ribs. The sound faded. Then came again. Slower, closer. She moved to the fence line and waited, eyes on the far bend where the sheep trail disappeared behind the rocks. What came out wasn't what she expected. It was Marshal Bearden's bay gelding, riderless. Blood on the saddle. She rushed to meet it, caught the reins just as the beast staggered to a halt. One stirrup torn loose. The badge still pinned to the saddlebag, her breath caught. Eyes scanned the hilltops. Then another sound, crunch of boots on gravel. From the trail above, a man emerged, limping. Coat torn, not the outlaw, one of the deputies, his face slack with pain, a crimson smear down his chest. He saw her, tried to speak, then collapsed against the rocks. She ran to him, rifle in hand, but it was no use. He was gone before she knelt. In his hand, a scrap of cloth. She pried it loose, part of a coat, her coat, the one she'd given the man that morning. The wind carried the scent of gunpowder now, and fresh death. Ada stood over the deputy's body, the chill of it climbing up through her knees as she knelt, the stone beneath her damp with blood not yet cold. The cloth in his hand trembled in hers, the same dull green from the coat she'd pressed on the outlaw before dawn. She turned it over once, twice, like the truth might change if she saw it from enough angles. But truth don't care about angles. It just sits there, mean and still. The bay gelding shifted behind her, snorting, stomping, wound tight with what it had seen and not understood. She rose slow, breath thick in her throat. Somewhere out in that wind-lashed stretch of rock and cedar, a man was still breathing who shouldn't be, or maybe should more than the law allowed. She led the gelding back to the stable, silent save for the creak of leather and the grind of hoof on packed dirt. Inside, she brushed the blood from its flank with one hand and saddled her mare with the other. She didn't bother with a note. No one left to read it. Her father's rifle slid easy into the scabbard. 2 jars of jerky. A half-loaf of cornbread wrapped in wax cloth. Canteen. Matches. She slipped the coin pouch into her coat, where the weight of it pressed close to her ribs like a question. The sheep trail cut narrow along the ledge, just wide enough for hooves and maybe a lie or two. Sky was clouding again, long gray fingers dragging slow behind the peaks, smell of rain brewing sharp and mean. She rode hard where she could, walked where she had to, eyes sharp for signs. Took near an hour 'fore she found the first one, a broken branch, not wind-snapped, but torn by a man leaning hard where he shouldn't. A blood smear on the bark. Another 20 minutes brought her to a dead pine where buzzards circled, slow and low. She tightened the reins and rode under 'em. Found the second deputy laid out like a dropped puppet, arms askew, mouth open to the sky, throat slit clean, no weapon drawn. She knelt beside him, searched his pockets. Empty but for a stick of licorice and a gospel tract folded neat. She tucked both back in, whispered a word she didn't believe in, and stood. The wind hissed through the dry grass. Somewhere a crow called once, twice, like it was counting sins. She pressed on. Dusk pulled long shadows across the trail, turned the rocks blue and the brush silver-edged. Then she saw the fire, tucked into a hollow below the ridge, banked low but still breathing. A soft crackle, smell of wet pine sap and scorched beans. She dismounted slow, tied the mare to a scrub oak and crept in low, boots silent on the stone. He sat with his back to her, coat slung over his shoulders, one arm limp in his lap, the other holding the colt across his knees. His head turned before she could speak. "Figured it'd be you," he said. His voice was hoarse, flat. No surprise in it. She stepped into the firelight, rifle down but not loose. "I saw what you left." He didn't nod, didn't move, just watched the flames. "They weren't common to take me. They were common to end it." Bearden made up his mind 'fore he ever rode into your yard. "You slit a man's throat. He drew first. The other shot me in the back before I took the horse. And Bearden, gone, ran when he saw the others drop. Left his badge and his boots behind." Ada stared at him, fire popping, low between them. "You're telling me they hunted you like game and you just defended yourself." "I'm telling you I never wanted to pull iron again. But the world don't care what a man wants, just what he does." She took a breath, felt the strain of it in her ribs. "You could have kept running." "I did." "Then why this?" She pulled the coin pouch from her coat and tossed it into the dirt near his boot. "Why take this if you weren't looking to disappear?" He didn't pick it up, didn't even look down. "Because you gave it to me, and I needed to believe someone still could." That landed harder than it ought to have. She stepped back, sat on a flat rock near the fire, and let the warmth work through her boots. Her hands were cold, jaw tight. "My father," she began, then stopped. He waited. He raised me to trust truth over pride. But pride has a voice like thunder. Truth's more like creek water. It don't shout, just flows. He nodded slow. Your father, he wasn't cruel, but he was stubborn, wouldn't back down. I gave him every chance. And still you drew, because he would have shot me dead if I didn't. He ever tell you why he hated my kind? She looked over. Your kind. Former riders, men who laid down their guns. He thought once you carried iron for money, you stayed cursed. Maybe he was right. Maybe. Silence coiled again. Wind rustled the brush. His fire cracked. Then he said, I didn't kill him for gain. I killed him 'cause he gave me no road but death. She rubbed her thumb along the stock of her rifle, eyes on the firelight flickering through the cracks of his face. You don't get to be both outlaw and martyr. I ain't trying to be. He reached for the pouch, finally, and pressed it into the dirt beside him. Take it back. Why? Because I don't want it weighing on you. She didn't move, didn't speak. The fire hissed. From somewhere far, the first echo of thunder rolled over the ridgeline. He stood, slow and shaky, the Colt still at his side. I'll ride tonight. If I make it across the pass, you won't see me again. And if you don't, then maybe I get what's owed. You think it's owed. Don't matter what I think. World keeps its own ledger. He stepped past her, limping toward his horse. She watched the shape of him fade into dusk, swallowed by trees and thunder. She stayed by the fire. Let the minutes pile up in quiet. When the last orange flicker died, she took the pouch and held it tight. Her hand shook just once. Then came a sound she didn't expect. Hooves, fast, from behind. She spun, rifle raised. A rider galloped into view, slick with rain and panic. It was a boy, 17 maybe, hat askew, eyes wide. Miss Dalton, he shouted. You gotta come quick. Widow Mackey's place. Marshal Bearden just rode and bleedin'. Says the outlaw doubled back. Says he's killin' 'em one by one. Ada's heart stopped cold. The boy's horse came up hard, hooves throwing gravel like buckshot, breath huffing clouds into the dusk. Ada didn't move till the reins slackened and the boy dropped down, face flushed and wild with the kind of fear that don't come from stories. It comes from seeing men bleed. Marshal Bearden, he panted, hands on his knees. He's alive. Barely, rode and dragging his leg. Said that outlaw, you know, the one that was at your place, he ain't run. He doubled back. He's killin' the posse one by one. The words hit like a hard rain, fast, cold, and loud. Ada's breath caught, ribs stiff under her coat. She'd seen Bearden ride off, pride burnin' hotter than sense. Now he was gut-shot and cryin' wolf. She looked to the ridge, the path where the outlaw had vanished. How bad? She asked. The marshal, the boy nodded quick. Shot through, pale as chalk. Widow Mackey's tryin' to boil bandages, but he keeps callin' your name, said you'd know what to do. She didn't, not really. But she swung into the saddle anyway, rifle across her thighs, coin pouch still heavy at her side. The boy turned his horse and kicked off ahead, hooves hittin' the trail like war drums. Rain started spittin' now, wind shovin' at her back, pine scent sharp as whiskey in her nose. It was near pitch by the time Widow Mackey's cabin rose out of the mist. Just a lean stack of logs and a rusted stove pipe coffin, smoke into the storm. A lantern burned behind the window, and the smell of boiled rags and old wounds met her at the door. Inside, Bearden lay stretched across the widow's table, shirt cut open, blood soaked spread to the edge. His badge was gone. His pistol, too. Just a pale man with a bullet in his side and a story between his teeth. Ada stepped close, boots soft on the wood. The marshal's eyes fluttered, then fixed on her. Dalton, he rasped. He's hunting us. You mean the outlaw? She asked low. The one you swore was running scared. He ain't running, he's cleaning the board, killed Pike, gut-shot Langley. Wade's missing, came at me through the trees, fast, cold. Didn't say nothing, just drew and smiled. Bearden coughed, a wet rattle deep in his chest. Ada glanced at Widow Mackey, who was wringing out another cloth, eyes wide with questions but lips sealed. "Where'd he go?" Ada asked. "Back toward the gulch," Bearden wheezed. Said I'd pay last, that I'd watch it all crumble." Ada leaned in close, voice like a matchstick. "What you do, Marshal? What you do that turned him back around?" Bearden's eyes fluttered again. "We wasn't bringin' him to justice," he muttered. "Just ridden him down, make it look legal, no trial, no chance." "Why?" "Orders. The kind that ride from town to town on whisper, not paper. Some folks didn't want that man speakin'. Said he knew too much 'bout Dry River." Ada's spine went rigid. "You mean my father?" The marshal nodded, then sagged. "Judson was more than a rancher. He kept things quiet for the right folks." She stepped back, jaw tight. The room smelled of sweat and secrets now. The outlaw hadn't run because he had no place to run to. Not with men like Bearden cleanin' up old sins. She left the cabin without a word. Rain pelted her hat brim, slid down her coat collar. Somewhere beyond the trees, a crow screeched once. The air was thick with the sour bite of old pine smoke and gunpowder long since cooled. She mounted up and turned west, toward the gulch. Toward answers. She found Wade first. Slumped against a tree, boots off, hat still on. A look on his face like he'd seen something too fast to understand. His pistol was still holstered. His throat wasn't cut, but the hole under his ribs had dried in a pattern that meant he never got a shot off. Nearby, horses snorted in the dark, spooked but staying. She pressed on. Fog coiled through the brush and the wind bent the trees in low moans. Somewhere up ahead a branch snapped. Not wind snapped. Weight snapped. She dismounted, boots sinking into the wet moss, took the rifle from the scabbard and moved quiet. Through the mist, the outlaw's voice drifted soft as smoke. "I figured it might be you." She stopped behind a rock outcrop, breath held. "You killed 'em," she called. "All of 'em." Silence. Then his voice again. "They weren't law, just men wearing tin to clean up other men's messes." She stepped into the clearing. He stood over a small fire, blood seeping through his sleeve, but upright, Colt in hand, lowered. "You doubled back," she said. "Why?" He looked at her, rain streaking his face like sweat. "Because the story they told you wasn't true. And I figured if I died, I'd rather it be with the truth spoken, not swallowed. You're telling me my father wasn't who I thought?" "No, ma'am, he was who you thought. And he wasn't, same as any man. He kept order in Dry River, but not by prayin', by dealin', by buryin' what needed buryin'. You included." He smiled, crooked. "I was a thorn he couldn't pull without drowning blood, so he tried to frame me. And when I caught wind, I came to talk, not to fight, but Bearden was already waiting." Ada lowered her rifle a hair. "So you ran." "I bled, then I ran." The wind howled through the gap behind him. The fire hissed under fresh rain. She stepped closer. "And now I'm tired, Miss Dalton, too tired to keep running from ghosts wearing boots." He reached into his coat slow, pulled out the coin pouch, dropped it at her feet. "That's yours, always was." She stared at it. It hadn't bought his freedom, hadn't bought her peace, just bought time enough to know neither came cheap. "I ought to take you in," she said. "You could. But then what? Trial in a town your father once ruled. Judge with Bearden's boot on his neck. There ain't justice in that, just repetition." Ada raised her rifle, the air buzzed. He didn't flinch, just looked her square. "You pull that trigger, I won't curse you. Might even thank you." Thunder cracked behind the hills, deep and slow. Her finger settled on the trigger guard, not the trigger. She took a breath, then another, and lowered it. "Go," she said, "before I change my mind." He blinked, nodded once, then turned. But before he reached his horse, a rifle cracked from the tree line. The outlaw stumbled, dropped to one knee. Blood bloomed again. Ada spun, leveled her rifle, but the shooter was gone, just a shadow slipping away through the fog. She rushed to him. He was on his side now, breath wheezing. You see who? She asked. He shook his head. Doesn't matter. Hell it don't. His hand closed around her wrist. They'll keep common, men like that don't quit. But you still got breath, make it count. She pressed her coat to the wound, but the red just kept common. His eyes started to glass. Tell me, she whispered, tell me who sent Bearden. But his lips just parted and stilled. Rain came hard then, beating the earth with flat palms, thunder rolling across the ridgeline like judgment slow to rise. Ada knelt beside the outlaw, her coat soaked, hair plastered to her face, hands pressed against a wound she knew she couldn't close. His blood ran warm through her fingers, not frantic now, just steady, like the last of a story being told. His eyes were open but no longer seeing. Breath gone quiet, gone still. She felt it when it left him, like a door creaking, shut in a house she once knew. She stayed there a long time, not praying, just listening, wind sifting through the junipers, the tick of cooling iron. Her own heart heavy but steady, saying one thing over and over, he told the truth. She rose stiff, legs numb from kneeling, and eased the Colt from his hand. It was almost empty. She thumbed the cylinder, 2 rounds left. One of them had gone through him. The other had missed its mark, or maybe hadn't been meant for one. She turned, scanned the trees, the rocks, the trail where the shot had come from. Nothing moved now but the rain and her breath. Whoever'd pulled the trigger had vanished, maybe scared off by the sight of her rifle, maybe ridden back to whatever backroom boss had sent Marshal Bearden with his posse full of secrets. Ada crouched and took the coin pouch from the mud, heavier now with water and what it had come to mean. She tucked it away, slung the outlaw's arm over her shoulder and dragged his body beneath the ledge where the fire'd been. Laid him flat, crossed his hands, covered his face with his coat. Ain't no preacher to say your name, she muttered, but I reckon the wind'll carry it just the same. Then she took the shovel from her saddlebag and started digging. The earth fought her at first, rocky, root-choked, but softened the deeper she went. Rain helped, turning the soil slick and dark till it gave easy. She didn't say much when she lowered him in. Just one line, low and rough as gravel. You saved my life more ways than one. She marked the grave with a stone, a flat one, set his pistol on top, empty now, let the rain clean it all. By first light the clouds had broke. The world steamed in the early sun, all golden mist and birds chirping like the night hadn't happened. Ada rode back slow, every hoofbeat a drum in her chest, every bend in the trail whispering, what now, what next? She passed Wade's body again, still untouched. The buzzards hadn't come yet, maybe they knew better. At Widow Mackey's the boy was waiting, still pale, still jittery, but breathin'. He ran to meet her as she dismounted. Is he asked. She nodded once, gone, and the others, same. What now? Ada looked past him to the door. Where's Bearden? Still breathin', barely, ain't said nothin' since you left. She stepped inside. The marshal was curled on the floor now, not the table, jaw slack, eyes flutterin' behind closed lids like he was dreamin' of runnin'. She knelt beside him, watched the way his chest rose and fell, shallow and slow. He wasn't gone. Not yet, but he'd never ride again. Never silence another man with a badge and a whisper. She leaned close. They sent you to clean up after ghosts, she said. Well, they're the ones left hauntin' now. Bearden stirred, just a flicker. She left him there. Went outside, hands raw, throat dry, sun already beaten down with mid-morning heat. She turned to the boy. Ride into Dry River. Tell Sheriff Mooney what's happened, every part of it. What about you? He asked. Ain't you common? Not yet. Why not? She looked down at her boots. The mud, the blood, the story she'd lived through. I got things to burn. That afternoon she rode home. The house stood quiet, porch leanin', chickens peckin' without care. Inside she moved like a woman carrying stone. She stripped the sheets from her father's bed, stacked the old records, the ledgers, every scrap of his life she could find. paper, metal, framed photos she hadn't touched in years. All of it went into a barrel behind the barn. She lit the fire with dry pine and a match, and watched the smoke rise into a sky too wide for lies. She didn't cry, but her hands shook a little when she tossed in the last thing. A letter she'd never opened, one she found folded in her father's drawer, marked asterisk for Ada if I fall. She didn't need to read it now. The truth had already spoken, in blood and breath and the space between silence. That night she sat on the porch, the rifle across her lap, the coin pouch beside her. Stars blinked out one by one behind slow-moving clouds, and the wind was warm and quiet like a sigh. Morning came and she packed her saddlebag. Water jerky, coin. She wore her father's belt but not his gun. She took the outlaws instead, cleaned, loaded, and holstered high on her hip. Before she mounted, she scratched a word into the porch post with her knife. One word, enough. Then she rode east, past the sheep trail, past the widow's place, past where the land still remembered the things she couldn't forget. She didn't know where she was headed, only that it'd be somewhere else. Somewhere she could plant something and watch it grow without wondering what lay buried beneath. And maybe, just maybe, tell the truth when someone asked what happened back in Dry River. Tell it plain, tell it whole. That a man came looking for peace and found bullets. That a woman learned her father wasn't what she thought, and neither was the man she nearly killed. That revenge is a road with no return but mercy. Mercy might just be a trail worth following. The wind picked up as she rode, flapping her coat, singing through the mesquite like a memory too old to hold a grudge. And Ada Dalton, daughter of Judson, keeper of her own fire now, didn't look back. You've been riding with old Western stories. If the tale hit your mark, give it a like, drop a comment about your favorite part, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next trail we ride. Don't forget, hit that subscribe so you're always in the saddle, and you'll always be ready when the next story rides in.